The case had been talked about quietly for several weeks, not because it was dramatic or violent, but because it was unusual. Most family cases never drew much attention, but this one somehow reached the ears of many people in the small town. It involved a young girl named Lena who was only 8 years old. She was gentle, polite, and soft-spoken. People who knew her said she rarely cried, rarely complained, and always tried to make others smile, even when she looked tired herself. No one could imagine her standing in a courtroom, especially not in front of adults who argued loudly and spoke in long, complicated sentences. Her parents had separated a few months earlier. It had not been messy or loud. There were no big fights or angry scenes. Instead, there was a quiet sadness that lived in the house for a long time. Her father and mother tried to stay calm, tried to avoid arguing in front of Lena, but children see what grown-ups try to hide. She noticed the long pauses in conversations, the sighs late at night, and the way they avoided sitting too close to each other. She didn't fully understand what was happening at first, but she felt the change long before they ever said anything. The separation left both her parents unsure of what to do. They wanted what was best for Lena, but they wanted her close too. They wanted to protect her, take care of her, and keep her world stable. But the question of where she would live most of the time became a difficult topic. Her mother believed Lena needed a calm, gentle environment. Her father believed she needed structure and routine. Both loved her deeply, but love alone was not enough to make things easy. Their discussions eventually turned into formal talks with a lawyer, and then a court hearing was scheduled. The hearing wasn't meant to be dramatic. It was simply to decide what would benefit Lena the most. Everyone expected the judge to make the decision after listening to the parents and their lawyers. That was how these hearings usually went. Children rarely spoke. And even if they did, it was usually in a private room with a counselor. No one expected the judge to ask Lena directly how she felt. The day of the hearing arrived on a cool morning. The sky was pale, as if unsure whether to become sunny or stay cloudy. Lena woke up early, even before her mother. She sat on the edge of her bed, hugging a small notebook she had been writing in for weeks. It was her secret place, a small book filled with simple words, questions she didn't know how to ask out loud, and things she wished she could say but didn't have the courage to. Sometimes she wrote about her mother's quiet tears in the kitchen. Sometimes she wrote about her father trying too hard to make jokes during dinner so she wouldn't feel sad. She wrote about how much she loved them both and how much she hated being the reason. They were struggling. Her mother knocked gently on the door and walked in with a soft smile. She helped Lena get dressed and brushed her hair carefully. Lena sat still, feeling her mother's shaky hands. She didn't say anything. She just let her mother finish, then hugged her tightly as if trying to give her strength. They reached the courthouse a little before noon. There were people walking in and out, some dressed formally, others looking tired or stressed. Lena held her mother's hand as they walked through the hall. She noticed her father standing near the entrance with his lawyer. He smiled when he saw her, not the big bright smile he used to have, but a small nervous one. She ran to him and hugged him too. For a moment, her parents stood there awkwardly, not sure if they should talk or stay quiet. They managed a short hello. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. Inside the courtroom, there were wooden benches, tall windows, and a large desk where the judge would sit. Lena had never been in a place like this before. It felt heavy, serious, and strangely quiet. Her mother sat on one side with her lawyer. Her father sat on the other side. Lena sat in the middle row, clutching her notebook tightly with both hands as the hearing began. The judge entered the room. He was an older man with kind eyes and a calm expression. He greeted everyone politely and listened as each lawyer took turns explaining their side. Her mother's lawyer talked about the stability her mother could give her. Her father's lawyer talked about how much effort he had put into building routines for Lena. Each side spoke gently, not accusing the other, but the tension in the air was still strong. Lena listened quietly. She didn't fully understand the legal terms, but she understood the feelings behind the words. She could hear the worry in her mother's voice, the hope in her father's, and the frustration hidden between the lines of the lawyer's arguments. She could also feel her own heart beating faster and faster as she realized that everyone was talking about her future. Without really knowing what she kept inside, the judge asked a few questions, nodded several times, and took notes. At one point, he glanced at Lena. His eyes softened and he paused. Then he asked gently, "Does Lena feel comfortable speaking today?" "Only if she wants to." Her parents looked shocked. They turned toward her, unsure what to expect. The lawyers looked surprised too. Most people assumed children would be too scared or too confused to say much. But the judge asked with such kindness that it didn't feel frightening. Lena looked down at her notebook. Her fingers curled around it tightly. She hadn't thought she would have to speak. She had written her thoughts because she wasn't brave enough to say them out loud. She felt her throat tighten, but she also knew something important if she didn't speak. Her parents might never know what she truly felt. She stood up slowly. Her legs trembled a little, but she took a deep breath and walked toward the front of the room. Each step felt long, heavy, but also strangely freeing. The judge asked her if she wanted to sit or stand. She chose to stand. She held her notebook up and whispered, "Can I read something I wrote?" The room grew silent in an instant. Absolute silence. Even the sound of the air conditioning seemed to fade. Her mother's eyes filled with worry. Her father leaned forward, hands clasped together tightly. The judge nodded gently, encouraging her without rushing. Lena opened the notebook. The pages were filled with simple handwriting, some words crossed out, others written with almost trembling letters. She took a moment to gather her breath. She looked small standing there, but something about her presence made everyone pay attention. Her voice was quiet at first, unsure, but there was a warmth in it that slowly grew stronger. She began reading the first few lines she had written weeks ago. She didn't blame anyone. She didn't criticize anyone. She simply described how things felt from her small, honest point of view. She talked about sitting in her room listening to her parents talk in worried tones. She talked about how she missed the days when they cooked together or laughed at silly jokes. She mentioned how she noticed her mother's eyes were often tired and how her father seemed lonely even when he pretended not to be. As she continued reading, her voice remained gentle but steady. She spoke with a sincerity that adults rarely use. She didn't try to sound smart. She didn't try to impress anyone. She just spoke the truth as an 8-year-old understood it. Everyone in the room listened without moving. No one expected her to speak this way. No one expected her to open her heart so fearlessly. And yet, she did. That moment, simple and pure, changed the entire atmosphere of the room. And for the first time since the hearing began, every adult present stopped thinking about arguments and schedules. They remembered they were listening not to a case, but to a child who only wanted her parents to understand her heart. The courtroom felt completely still after Lena finished reading the first few lines from her notebook. It was as if everyone had forgotten how to breathe for a moment. Even the papers on the lawyers' desks seemed frozen in place. The judge leaned back slightly, his hands folded, watching her with a gentleness that made her feel safe enough to continue, but Lena paused. She looked down at her notebook and then at the judge, unsure if she should keep reading. The judge nodded softly again and said in a calm voice, "Take your time. There is no hurry." His words relaxed her. She took a breath and looked at her parents. Her mother wiped the corner of her eye, trying to hide her tears behind her sleeve. Her father was sitting forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on his daughter as if afraid to blink and miss a single word. Their faces made Lena's chest tighten with emotion, but she didn't stop. She held the notebook with both hands, her fingers trembling only a little now, and began to read again. She talked about how, after the separation, mornings felt different. She described the silence at breakfast, the way she pretended to be happy so her parents wouldn't feel sad, and how sometimes she would stay awake at night, listening to the soft noises of the house because she didn't know what else to do. She didn't try to explain the situation like an adult. She described it in the honest, innocent way a child experiences. Changed. As she continued speaking, the judge's expression softened even more. He listened the way a teacher listens to a student who has finally found the courage to speak after a long time. Her voice wavered a little when she spoke about the first night after her parents moved into different homes. She remembered lying in bed at her mother's place, staring at the ceiling, wondering if her father also missed her at that same moment. And when she stayed at her father's place, she wondered if her mother felt lonely eating dinner without her. She paused again and lowered the notebook. She wasn't crying, but her eyes had a shiny layer of unspoken feelings. The judge asked her gently, "Do you want some water?" She shook her head quietly. She didn't want to stop now. She had held these thoughts inside her for so long that letting them out finally felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. Then she said something without reading from the notebook. She spoke directly, as if the words were spilling out on their own. She told the courtroom that she never wanted her parents to think she loved one more than the other. She said she tried very hard to make them both happy because she felt responsible for their sadness, even though she didn't know why she felt that way. Her voice became even softer as she said, "I don't want either of them to think I didn't choose them. I don't want them to fight because of me." Her parents lowered their heads. Her father rubbed his forehead and took a deep breath. Her mother pressed her hand against her chest as if trying to keep her heart steady. They were hearing their daughter express feelings they never knew she had. They thought they were protecting her from the painful parts of the separation. They didn't realize she had been protecting them as well. In her own small way, the judge gave her a moment to gather her thoughts. Then he asked a question that everyone had been silently waiting for, though none of them dared to say it aloud. "Lena," he said, "is there something you want us to know about how you feel? Something that you think is important for us to hear?" Lena looked at her notebook again, slowly turning the pages as if searching for the right sentence. Her small fingers brushed over the words she had written on the last page. She hesitated, then closed the notebook. She did not need it for what she was about to say next. She took a quiet breath and spoke from her heart. "I don't want to choose who to live with more," she said softly. "I love them both. They both do their best for me. I don't want one of them to feel like I don't want them." The room grew even quieter. The judge didn't interrupt. The lawyers lowered their eyes. Even the people sitting in the back row listened with genuine emotion. The innocence in her voice made her words powerful, stronger than any argument presented earlier. She went on to explain how she felt torn between her two homes. How she didn't want her father to think she missed him less when she was staying at her mother's place. How she didn't want her mother to think she was happier at her father's place just because she smiled or laughed there. She said she wished she could split herself in half so both of them would always have her near. Her honesty filled the room like a quiet echo that refused to fade. The judge finally spoke, and his voice was calm. "Thank you, Lena," he said, as if she had just done something incredibly brave. And she had. Most adults would struggle to express feelings that clearly. The judge knew that. He asked her if she wanted to return to her seat. She nodded and walked back slowly, still clutching her notebook. Her mother reached out and touched her hand gently for a second. Her father whispered, "You were very brave," just loud enough for her to hear. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, and though nothing was said, something inside both of them softened. After she sat down, the judge took a few seconds to breathe and gather his thoughts. He had heard countless cases throughout his career. Some were complicated. Some were emotional. But he rarely heard a child speak with such clarity and sincerity. He looked at both parents and said, "I believe we have heard what matters most today." Her parents exchanged nervous glances. They didn't know what he meant yet. The judge spoke again, calmly but firmly. "Lena has expressed her feelings with great honesty. And from what she shared, it's clear she loves both of you deeply. She does not want conflict. She does not want to make a choice that hurts either of you." Her mother nodded quickly, wiping her cheek. Her father swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. The judge continued, "This tells me something important. The solution here is not about one of you winning more time or less time. It is about finding an arrangement that respects her emotional well-being." Both parents leaned in slightly, almost at the same time. For a moment, they looked like two people who cared about the same thing again, but before the judge could continue, something unexpected happened. Lena raised her hand slightly, almost like a student asking to speak again. The judge looked at her with surprise but nodded. She stood up once more, her notebook resting on the bench. She didn't bring it with her this time. She looked at her parents and said in the softest voice, "I just want you both to be okay. I don't want you to be sad because of me." Her mother covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold back tears. Her father pressed his hands together tightly, looking down, trying to steady himself. That one simple sentence shook them more deeply than anything said earlier. They had been fighting for what they believed was best for her, but they hadn't realized that she had been carrying the weight of their sadness as if it were her responsibility. The judge let her words settle in the room, before addressing the parents again. "I think," he said gently, "that this is a moment for both of you to reflect." He didn't rush them. He allowed the silence to stay, giving them space to think. They looked at each other, not with blame, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding they had forgotten how to share. Meanwhile, Lena sat down again, breathing slowly, as if she had finally let go of something she had been holding inside for too long. The hearing wasn't over yet, but something important had already changed. The judge could sense it. The parents could sense it. Even the quiet observers in the back row felt it. This case was no longer about paperwork, schedules, or winning. It had turned into something deeper, a moment where a child's voice had reached the hearts of every adult in the room, a moment that none of them would forget. The courtroom remained unusually quiet even after Lena sat down again. It was the kind of silence that didn't come from fear or formality, but from people being deeply moved. The judge took a slow breath, as if giving everyone a moment to settle their emotions before the discussion continued. It was clear to everyone that what Lena had said had changed something important in the atmosphere. It was as if the walls of the courtroom, usually stiff and serious, now held a soft warmth created by her honesty. Her parents seemed unable to look away from her. Her mother kept glancing at her with watery eyes, her lips pressed tightly together so she wouldn't cry again. Her father's hands were still clasped, but his shoulders had dropped, no longer tense. His gaze followed every small movement Lena made, as if he had suddenly realized how fragile she was, and how much she had been carrying. The judge finally leaned forward and spoke softly, choosing his words with care. "What this young girl has shared today is not something we can ignore. It takes a lot of courage to speak from the heart, especially at her age." Her parents nodded slowly, both of them still processing her words. Before the judge could continue, Lena's mother stood up without waiting to be called. She hesitated, then said, "Your Honor, I didn't know she felt this way. I thought I was protecting her from all the sadness, but I see now she saw more than I realized." Her father rose too, almost on reflex, and added, "I thought keeping things normal for her would help. I didn't know she was trying to carry our pain for us." It was rare for both parents to speak like this at the same time, without any trace of argument. Their voices trembled for different reasons: regret, guilt, and a deep love for their daughter that they were suddenly seeing in a new light. The judge listened quietly, letting them finish. Then he said, "She doesn't blame either of you. She simply wants peace, and she wants you both to be all right." The room grew still again as the judge paused. He turned toward Lena and said, "You've done something very special today." Sometimes adults forget how their actions affect the people they love the most. Lena lowered her eyes shyly. She wasn't used to being praised in front of so many people. She didn't speak to impress anyone. She had only spoken because she couldn't keep her feelings locked away anymore. But hearing the judge's words made her feel lighter, as if she had not only spoken the truth but also been understood. Then the judge addressed the parents, his tone gentle but firm. "I think it would be wise for both of you to hear more from her notebook. Not because it decides the case, but because it helps you understand her heart." Both her parents nodded at once, their expressions softening. They looked at Lena, silently asking whether she wanted to continue. Lena hesitated. She had already said so much. She didn't want to make anyone cry again. But she also knew she had a few more things written down, things she had been too afraid to speak before today. After a moment, she gave a small nod and walked back toward the front. Her steps slow but steady, she opened her notebook again. flipping to a page she had written on very late one night when she couldn't sleep. The handwriting was a bit messy, evidence of how emotional she had felt writing it. She looked at her parents once more before she began reading. She spoke about the nights she stayed at her father's house and felt guilty for leaving her mother alone. She spoke about the mornings at her mother's house when she missed her father's silly jokes. She said she didn't want to tell them that she worried about both of them all the time because she didn't want to make them sadder. Then she spoke a line that caused nearly everyone in the room to shift uncomfortably. Not because it was inappropriate, but because it was painfully honest. She said, "Sometimes I think I am the reason you both cry. I don't want to be that reason." Her mother covered her chest again, pressing her hand there as if trying to hold her heart together. Her father wiped his eyes quickly, hoping no one would notice, but everyone did. It wasn't embarrassing. It was human. When Lena finished reading that page, she paused, biting her lower lip. She didn't know if she should keep going. The judge nodded gently, encouraging her, but left the choice to her. She looked at her father, then at her mother. Something about seeing them both so emotional made her feel brave again. She flipped to the next page. This page was different. The first 2 pages were filled with confusion and worry, but this one held a wish, one she had never said aloud. She read it slowly, trying not to rush the words. She wished they could both come to her school events without looking uncomfortable. She wished they could stand next to each other during her school play or her sports day without thinking about their past. She wished her mother didn't feel the need to act strong all the time and her father didn't feel the need to pretend. He wasn't lonely. She ended the page by saying, "I just want you both to smile again." Her mother couldn't hold back her tears anymore. They flowed freely, but quietly. Her father put his hand over his mouth, looking like he hadn't cried in years but now couldn't stop himself. Even the judge blinked slowly as if trying to steady himself. He didn't allow his emotions to show too strongly, but anyone could see that Lena's words had touched him deeply. The lawyers sat silently, their usual confidence subdued. They looked like people who had suddenly realized this was not a case to debate, but a child's life to protect. The judge cleared his throat gently and spoke. "Lena's feelings are clear. Her understanding of the situation is more mature than many adults. But she should not have to carry these worries alone." Her parents looked at him anxiously, waiting for what he would say next. He leaned slightly forward and continued. "She does not want you to compete for her. She wants you to work together for her." His tone grew firmer yet stayed compassionate. "This means both of you must find a way to communicate better, to support her without making her feel torn." Her parents nodded again. It wasn't a forced nod. It was a real nod, one that came from their hearts, realizing they had to change. Before the judge could continue with formal instructions, Lena gently spoke again. "I don't want you to be angry with each other," she whispered, her voice almost a plea. "I want to be able to call you both whenever I miss you." Her father instantly nodded. "You can always call me," he said softly. "Anytime." Her mother wiped her tears and added, "The same goes for me, sweetheart. You can call me whenever you want." Lena looked between them, unsure if she could trust their words completely. She had heard promises before, but this moment felt different. Their faces didn't have the tension she often saw. They looked vulnerable, truly vulnerable in a way that felt honest. The judge sensed the shift too. He said, "Both of you have a responsibility not only to raise her but to ensure she feels loved without pressure." Her parents listened quietly, then something unexpected happened. Again, because of Lena, she closed her notebook and hugged it to her chest. She lifted her eyes and said, "I want you both to know I don't want you to get back together. I just want you to stop being sad." Her words were simple, innocent, but they carried more understanding than many adults could express. Her parents froze for a moment, surprised by her clarity. They weren't sure how they felt hearing it, but they knew she wasn't asking for something impossible. She wasn't trying to fix the past. She just wanted peace in the present. Her mother nodded slowly, whispering, "I understand." Her father added, "We can try to be better. For you." Lena gave a small, relieved smile, as if she had been waiting months to hear those words. The judge allowed the moment to breathe. He didn't interrupt the emotional connection forming between them. He simply observed with quiet appreciation. The hearing had started as a routine discussion about custody. But now, it had become something far deeper, a turning point for a family that had drifted too far apart, not because of arguments, not because of anger, but because of silence, distance, and unspoken pain. And now, thanks to a young girl's courage, everything was beginning to shift. What she said next would change the courtroom again, and it would leave everyone in tears. The courtroom felt different now. It no longer had the heavy seriousness it carried when the hearing first began. Instead, there was a gentle silence, like everyone was waiting for something important to unfold. Lena sat quietly in her seat, holding her notebook close to her chest. She had said more than she ever planned to, yet she didn't regret it. She felt lighter, as if a weight she had carried for months had finally been lifted. Her parents sat on opposite sides of the room, but for the first time that day, they both seemed more connected to her than to the arguments they had rehearsed. The judge watched them carefully, his expression thoughtful. He could see that this family wasn't broken, they were simply lost. And sometimes, being lost doesn't mean you can't find your way back to understanding. The judge cleared his throat softly and leaned forward. I want to remind everyone, he said gently, that today is not about pointing fingers or winning anything. It's about listening. And I think we've all listened to something very important. Lena glanced at her parents again. They were still watching her closely, their eyes soft with emotions they had been hiding for too long. Her father raised his hand slightly and asked if he could speak. The judge nodded. He stood up slowly, not with the confidence of someone who wanted to argue, but with the quiet humility of someone who had finally understood something meaningful. He looked at the judge first, then at Lena's mother, and finally at Lena. His voice was soft, a little shaky. I didn't know how much she was hurting. I thought I was doing the right thing by pretending to be strong. But maybe I should have talked to her more. Maybe I should have shown her it's okay to feel sad sometimes. Lena watched him carefully. Her father turned to her and said gently, "You don't have to worry about me, okay? I'm an adult. I'll be all right. Your job is not to make me happy. My job is to make sure you feel safe and loved." Lena's eyes warmed with tears, but she held them back, wanting to hear every word. Then her mother stood up. She took a small breath before speaking. I didn't realize how much pressure she felt. I kept thinking I was protecting her by staying strong. But maybe I made her feel like she had to pretend too. Her voice trembled and she pressed her hands together as if steadying herself. Lena, you never have to hide anything from me. You don't have to pretend to be okay when you're not. The sincerity in both of their voices settled into the room like a soft blanket. Giving everyone a moment to breathe, the judge looked between the two parents. This is a good start, he said kindly. But what matters most is how you move forward from today. He then turned to Lena. You've shown a lot of bravery. More than many grown-ups are capable of. But I want you to understand something important. You are not responsible for fixing anything. Adults must fix adult situations. Lena nodded slowly. She wasn't completely sure she believed it yet, but she was trying to. The judge continued, speaking to the parents. I believe the arrangement should not only allow both of you to spend meaningful time with her, but also give her the emotional space she needs. She does not want to choose, so we won't make her choose. Her mother bit her lip, nodding slowly. Her father nodded too, his expression soft. The judge took a moment, then asked gently, Is there anything else you want to say, Lena? Only if you feel comfortable. Lena looked down at her notebook, then lifted her eyes again. She didn't stand this time. She didn't need to. She knew her parents were listening to her now in a way they never had before. She spoke softly, almost whispering. I just want both of you to talk to each other. Not about the case, just talk like people who care about me. Her parents exchanged a long, quiet look. It wasn't angry or distant. It was a look filled with understanding they hadn't shared in a long time. Her mother nodded first. We can do that, she said gently. Her father added, We should have done it earlier. Lena smiled, a tiny smile, one that tugged gently at her parents' hearts. It wasn't a big, happy smile. It was a hopeful one, small but strong. The judge leaned back and smiled slightly. It wasn't common for him to express emotion while handling a case, but this one was different. "I think we have reached a good place," he said warmly. "Now I will give a few recommendations." He explained how the new arrangement would work. It wasn't strict or rigid. It was flexible, focusing on what Lena needed rather than what was convenient. Both parents would share time with her equally, but they would also be expected to communicate openly about her schoolwork, her feelings, and any concerns she might have. They wouldn't drop her off at the door and walk away. They would meet, exchange a few warm words, and show Lena she didn't have to feel torn between them. Her parents listened carefully, agreeing to everything without hesitation. It was clear they wanted to do better. After the judge finished speaking, he asked if Lena needed anything else. She shook her head. She had already said more than she expected. But she did look at her parents again, and this time her mother reached out her hand, surprisingly. Her father reached out too. Lena stood up slowly and walked between them. They didn't pull her to one side or the other. They simply knelt a little to be closer to her height and wrapped their arms around her gently, one on each side. It wasn't a family picture like before, but it was the closest thing to peace they had shared in a long time. The quiet observers in the courtroom watched with softened expressions. Some dabbed their eyes discreetly. Others smiled. Not because of drama or excitement, but because of the simple beauty of a child healing the space between two grown hearts. The judge didn't interrupt. He let them have that moment. After a few seconds, Lena finally allowed herself to cry, not from fear or confusion, but from relief. She cried softly, her small hands gripping her parents' sleeves. Her parents held her tighter, their own tears falling silently. Her father whispered, "We're going to do better." "I promise," her mother whispered. "You're not alone, ever." When they finally let go, the courtroom felt warmer, lighter, almost like a different place altogether. The hearing concluded soon after. The judge stood, gave Lena one last gentle nod, and left the room quietly. The lawyers packed their papers without the rush they usually had. Even they seemed affected by what they had witnessed. As the family walked toward the exit, her father and mother didn't walk separately this time. They walked side by side, not as a couple, but as two adults who had finally remembered that love for their child was bigger than any disagreement. Lena walked between them, holding both their hands. Her steps felt lighter than they had in months. When they reached the door, her mother looked at her father and asked softly, "Do you want to join us for lunch?" "She might like that." Her father smiled, an honest smile, not forced. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think she would." For the first time in a long time, Lena felt like the world wasn't divided into two homes or two choices. It felt like one safe space where she didn't have to pick sides. The case that many people had quietly talked about would soon carry a different kind of memory. Not a sad one. Not a complicated one, a hopeful one, because a young girl spoke from her heart, and her words left everyone in tears, not from pain, but from the reminder of what truly matters. Love, understanding, and the courage of a child who dared to speak her truth.